Dr. Jazz.
I went to your website and I listened to a number of your clips, and I really enjoyed your playing.
Oh, thank you. Well,
Yeah.
I've been a fan of yours for years, man. So you know, I'm so happy we can chat a little. So
Wow, it's amazing to me that you even know me. So
really, oh wow, interesting. No,
yeah,
oh come
I have
on.
no idea how the music gets around, you know.
Yeah,
But thank you, thank you.
I mean, if you like music, you know, I'm like a geek. I read all these encyclopedias, and then you know,
Uh,
let's say you're a fan of Braxton, and then I'm like, wow, who's the guy on Braxton record? You know this, and then
oh, I see.
you
Yeah,
you know
yeah,
how that goes. Then you're like,
yeah,
okay,
yeah, yeah.
and
Follow the
you
trees. Yeah,
yeah, and then like you know, you're there, and I don't know, I love Henry Threadgill, for instance, and you know, of course,
yeah,
and then you want to investigate anyone who plays with Henry because you know
right.
they're
Yeah.
gonna be
Oh,
really
okay.
good, you know, so that mostly. So yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
But
I just saw Anthony Braxton in Ann Arbor.
oh man,
We shared a bill at Edgefest, and he did a duo with James Fay, and then the University of Michigan group. Andrew Bishop
oh yeah,
is the professor there. They played his music, so
oh how's
you
that?
know
Nice, right?
it's good. Yeah, yeah, it was great.
Yeah, he's amazing.
Yeah,
He's still so productive. I mean, and active, Anthony. It's just like
yeah, yeah,
it's crazy.
yeah.
It's
Yeah, his creative drive is just off the charts. But I think when you meet him or talk to him, I think most people would say I mean, for me, one of his gifts is his joy. You know,
mm,
I mean, he just has so much joy in his process of discovery and creation, and it's infectious. I think that's his nature. Yeah.
yeah.
So.
Yeah, I want to ask you definitely about Anthony. You know, I know you guys, you played with him and cooperated with him, and
A few times, yeah.
yeah, so one of my biggest heroes. You know, it's
Oh, really? Okay.
yeah,
Okay.
I love the. You know, I've spoken to so many guys who did the creative orchestra, like 1978, the Köln one,
Oh,
and it's so funny
wow.
to. I really wanted to include almost the entire crew. I almost did it already, like of the guys who were there. I mean, Kenny is not here anymore, Wheeler and some other guys, but
Yeah, yeah.
it's just like when they describe the energy when that band first time went to America and all these cats were like, you know, Nat
Yeah.
Rothenberg and all these guys were 20 something, like
Yeah, yeah.
playing that crazy music in Paris and in Germany. And it's, man, just,
I know those interviews must give you it's just a more palpable sense of history. I mean, I never talked to him about it, but Carl Berger's creative
oh,
music workshop, he'll send me some flyer, and all these players that are legendary to us because we haven't met them and we admire them. Everybody was just hanging out and um in the same place, but I would read about some just little stories of New York. I mean, how New York is I mean, music history always divides people into little boxes
yeah,
and narratives, but I would read stories of Coltrane talking with Copeland, and then Copeland talking with Cho Wen Chung, who is a Chinese composer at the time. And they all were hanging out together. It wasn't like
yeah,
everybody was in their own worlds, just like we are now. I'm sure you
yeah,
have a lot of friends, different kinds of music.
yeah. I mean, definitely. That's one thing that at least this COVID made it happen, that kind of brought the community even closer together, I think, especially
Yeah,
the musicians. That's how I feel like we're more talking about where this is going, how to solve some issues, or
yeah, yeah.
it's already the music we played is
I think Yeah, I mean, I think since we missed it, we started to realize how essential it is, well, for us, improvisation is, for our type of improvisation, is being in the same space with someone and exchanging psychic energy and passion and I did some Zoom concerts and they were did you do any?
I did like
Yeah, it was
three long distance recordings. I mean, it was fun for me, to be in the studio and play, but it's not the same.
right.
It's like,
I know. And when it's over, it's like I felt like every drop of blood left my body and is not coming back.
yeah, yeah. It's
But we did something, right?
yeah, it's quite unfulfilling. Those events were, for me
Yeah,
at least. I was like, yeah, it's nice, we did it, but
right. And it wasn't satisfying.
yeah.
So, well,
So
I'm sure like listeners feel the same. So,
yeah, I mean, just to improvise in front of people and see, even if it's 5 or if it's 50 or whatever, just
right.
that you see the person and it's like, yeah, okay, we're
Yeah,
there. I mean, we
yeah.
do it for them as well, I think also. So that's
Looking back, it's just amazing. We went through that period. Just amazing.
yeah, crazy. Yeah.
But
Yeah, but
yeah.
that's how it is. I mean, I had like a 2-week tour now in October in Europe, and still felt really strange. We played Germany and Austria and Italy, and
Uh-huh.
still on some gigs, the promoters then afterwards said like, yeah, we're getting there, but it's not the same. Still, it's still this
Yeah.
awkward feeling present. That
I kind of feel we're just starting as well,
yeah,
and I think audiences too are they're just starting to feel safe.
again,
In
yeah,
New York, I mean, a lot of people still wear masks um and when I'm in on the subways especially, I wear a mask because there's a lot of people that don't believe in vaccines
yeah. I know,
and they're crazy people. So
yeah,
when I'm shoulder to shoulder with people, I thought, oh, I'm gonna put on a mask.
yeah. It doesn't hurt. I mean,
Right.
yeah. But
Yeah.
Jason, I
Yeah.
wanted to ask you, like, you've been extremely active, despite COVID or whatever. Like, when I thought I was on date with your music, but I wasn't. So then, like 2 weeks ago, I was like, oh, let's check your Bandcamp, and I was like, shit, man, I then I listened to so
Oh,
much stuff, and
oh man, thank you for listening.
yeah, and I love the Human Rights Trio that you have with Andrew and Ken,
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
and I saw you
You
also
know,
played. I don't know them personally, but I know who they are,
oh,
and
oh, okay, yeah.
I
Oh, thank
wanted to
you for
ask you,
listening. Yeah,
yeah,
sure.
I love the trio. It's like such a great unit, and you know, how did the trio come about? Actually, I know you've played together like already for 15 years or something. Like,
Yeah.
but when did you guys hook up?
Well, I think Andrew, uh, I had a group called the Far East Side Band, um, which the name was because at the time in the 90s, um, the music critics always talked about Lower East Side New York music, right? And so I kind of made sort of a humorous reference to that, but it was also a humorous response to some violent um, imagery featuring Asians by some prominent
Mm.
downtown musicians, which upset me deeply. And so when I went to Korea with the choreographer Sin Cha Hong, um, it was the first time I was in Asia, and I had this even though I'm Chinese and not Korean, it was still sort of it gave me a different sense of awareness
Mm.
that I'm from somewhere. My parents were actually from another place, which being born in America, I didn't have a concrete grasp of that. So I formed that band, and Andrew, that band was with eventually became with Joe Daley on tuba, Yukio Tsuji on percussion, and Sangwon Park on the Korean kayagum. And Andrew would sub a couple of times in the early 2000s.
Mm.
And then he was also, I think I met him there as the Musicians of Brooklyn initiative. which was a musicians organization. So he was there. And then Taylor, I believe I met through Anthony Braxton's projects. When Anthony, I think when Anthony was awarded the MacArthur, and I'm bad about the years, he was coming to New York to do these big oratorios. He did it at the Kitchen, then he did it at the Old Knitting Factory, and this was like involving maybe 30 musicians or so. It was big groups, singers, movies, puppets. It was like it was great. And I think Taylor was he might have been a graduate student then, and he was studying with Anthony, and then so I met him there, and he's just a tremendous player. So then Ken, I met. There was a concert series in the basement next door to CBGB's. It was called the CB's Galleria, and I was playing with William Hooker and Roy Campbell, and I was using an octave pedal.
Oh, really? Oh, wow. Yeah.
And so Ken came up to me and said, like, "Hey, man, that's pretty good bass playing." And I thought, "Damn, Ken Filliano said I saw." So initially, I called the three of them to form the Quartet Edge, and then the Human Rights Trio was when Taylor left New York. He couldn't come to New York to do these gigs with me. So then I started a quintet. Adding Steve Swell on trombone and Chris Forbes on piano, and we did one CD, and then from there the trio came about, which was new for me. I'd never had a trio. I always had like a two-horn type of concept for small ensembles. But before the pandemic, I had Sing House. I was close to having composed enough to do another CD, so I still have that in mind. It's still one of those pre-pandemic projects that I haven't done. But Human Rights Trio, we've been, I think we had all the type of experience from the other groups, and right now we're getting ready. I've written music, trying to get ready for another recording, possibly this spring, I think. Yeah.
Oh, fantastic! Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you write music for that trio? I mean, when generally the most of the music that I hear of you, it's like a lot of it is composed, but then you sometimes it's hard to defer for me, which is a good thing. What is improvised and what's composed, and also with this, how do you compose like for this trio or like in general? I mean, how do you start?
Well, sometimes I have different ideas, and I still struggle with of how to interface a written composition with improvisation and flow. And one thing I noticed, like for written composition, basically you're setting a rhythm, you're setting a vertical relationship, or a line, or if you want to call it a melody or whatever. So it's a different energy, and I try to compose energy as well, like that type of energy versus improvisation. And so the other thing is I start to see the written sections, as part of a journey. So if you travel through that notation and it makes you arrive somewhere. And so sometimes, it's in terms of like the traditional jazz improvisation. It's basically you are responding to the preceding melody and doing whatever exposition in your solo. But I'm also trying to sometimes have the written music, and as it goes into improvisation, it doesn't necessarily look back. It's about pushing it, the story forward. And so I think of that, But I also try to, I'm always reconsidering the compositional language, and sometimes I will have chord changes. And it may not be for a melody, it is for a transitional passage. Other times, though, I do have song forms, and I think like a lot of people in the public always think free improvisation is like anything, right? But it really depends on who you are. And for Ken and I think we're constantly thinking harmonically whether we sit down and analyze it or not, we can feel harmonic tension and release and movement and changing keys or whatnot. And sometimes, so when I write a cycle of chords like as in a usual jazz tune, to me it's a song, but it's also a ritual, because it's like you're going through this passage and then you come back to it again with more discovery and that. So I think of, I try to think of, I'm playing with some of those ideas to guide how I write for improvisation.
Mm. Do you write a lot, like on a daily basis? I mean, or do you write only when like you say like, okay, I'm gonna do for, human rights music, or do you like have a daily routine? Or
I don't write every day. I usually will like prepare for a concert, and I am in a mode where, and maybe this is an old mode, the mode of writing music, rehearsing, performing, and then recording. And I know it's different now. There's some younger musicians that are releasing a ton of recordings like once a month or something, and it's less this idea of the perfect rendering of this composition than the life process. So they're releasing like 10, 20 CDs a year. And then I guess what I was also wondering too, that I was pondering, I had composed music for string orchestra, improvising string orchestra, and we did a performance at the Vision Festival.
Oh, really? Oh, wow, man.
Yeah. And so for that music, there is maybe a dozen composed passages, but then there's conducted improvisations, and I have to say I am indebted, to my years playing with Butch Morris, because I would be watching him intently for so many concerts. And Butch, for a few years I was kind of mad at him. And he can be a harsh person on the surface, but in his heart he was not. And he invited me to play at Billy Bang's memorial, and so he featured me, and at the rehearsals, all of a sudden I realized why, because every musical decision he made is something I felt, and I thought he has really gotten into my musicality, just about flow and his instincts for timing and stuff. So but anyway, so we had this performance, which is going to be really hard to record without a ton of money. We did it at Roulette. I'm trying to get a hold of the multi-track, but I thought maybe I want to release this to the world as a video, and just wouldn't be pay to play, but to present it to the world as a release. And so have you do you release a lot of records? Or
that's I mean, I talk with everyone about that, like I mean, you're one generation before me, but like when for us, for you too, a record was, when you bought an album, like people, it was a big thing, I think. And nowadays it's just, I release records, like 2-3 a year, but which is, I think, a lot,
Okay, well, that's pretty good. That's pretty good.
Or sometimes
now people are releasing LPs, and I think I'm going to release a wax cylinder.
I'm just wondering what to do in the future. It's like, I mean, I had this.
Well, also because the CDs, people aren't buying, and I don't know if you release a digital album. I don't know. People don't. I might be wrong, but some people don't value it as much.
True. Yeah. True.
But when they hold something, it's something special.
Yeah, but
LPs are very expensive for self-release. They're so expensive.
Exactly.
I'm not gonna do it.
No, me neither.
But maybe the world will make me.
Yeah, I don't know, also to travel with, they're so heavy, and it's just,
Right.
I have no idea, especially for this improvised music or whatever we play, modern avant-garde jazz. I don't know why we play, but what you do. I think it's so hard because it's already, the market is not really huge, of course, and then what to do, how to present a record, how to get it that people actually get it, and
right.
I have no idea,
mailing is more expensive, and also they're only 18 minutes aside, which is and then if you want to release a double CD,
oh man,
it's really
don't even go there. It's like financial disaster. It's
so we're it's different times, but now there's so many I don't know if it's just more people, but there's just so many CDs being produced a month. If you send one to a critic and they're getting 200 CDs a week, it's pretty hard for them, if they don't know you, to listen to you, right?
It's I mean, if you know some journalists, it's easier. I figured out, 3 years you get these tentacles everywhere, and some people, but still, even those people, then if they know you and your friends, you're like, shit, man, I have like 20 CDs that I promised to do, and like, it's hard. But even then, like, you got a review, and then you're gonna get a but you know what I mean, this 5-star review, it's like, one of the best whatever music, it's fresh. And then you take this quote like, incredibly fresh, modern. I don't know, I'm doubting everything lately. When I was younger, I was like taking all these quotes and like, I'm gonna get, a downbeat review, and I get gigs and everything, and it's like, well, nothing changed basically.
I know. but this change, I think, in distribution and in cultural production, I think has changed the historical recording, the historicity, the writing of history, because I think in the past, when there was a manageable amount of production, you could sort of assess some type of a narrative of history progressing, and also what are the classical records of the decade that really stood out. But now the volume is so much, and the narratives are so diverse and abundant. It's much more random, and a lot of non-musical narratives start to make choices. So not what you play as much as who you are and what you play.
True.
And I don't know how that will shake out in the future. But someone told me that happened to modern art as well, as far as, there used to be, all the way through abstract expressionism and pop art, and then all hell broke loose and everyone's doing all sorts of stuff, and, it's kind of, that's where we are, I think. And in a way, it's really great because there's so much wonderful creativity everywhere. On the other hand, if you're in the business of getting famous, it might be a little tough.
There's already a wrong stream of music. It's, I think. No, but some, like you said, there are some positives. My experience with Bandcamp is really good, to be honest. I offer also to people not only digital downloads, but that they can buy physical CDs. And, like every week I got mails from the States or Canada, and people, I pack the CDs in an envelope and I send them. So it's also, you got this more personal relationship to fans and lovers of music. It's like Richard from Dallas is ordering 2 of your CDs, and it's like, well, okay, it's nice to see, and I don't know.
That's my experience too, and it's always amazing to me how people find us. So I remember the first record I did was in the early 80s. it was a collective group called Commitment with William Parker and Will Connell Jr. and Zen Matsuura. And then it wasn't until the early 90s I was in Moscow with Vladimir Tarasov.
Wow, really? Oh man.
Yeah. And then someone came backstage with a Commitment LP. And I thought, damn, how did you get that? You know? Because we didn't sell that many.
And that was even harder back then, of course.
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah, so that's but when I think about it, it was years ago when the World Sax Quartet did a Ellington CD, and it got a lot of play, and I think it sold something like 10,000. And I remember Julius Hemphill said, well, this record sold more than all of our records together. And then when I really thought about it, because, you know, in the pop world, even 10,000 is like nothing, right?
It's change, yeah.
So, yeah, so if they're selling whatever they sold, and yet it made such a mark on history and posterity, right? So that the numbers are not always, I think, indicative of how the music where it goes and how it reaches people. You know,
I agree. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not so dark. You know, some people get really dark. I mean, we also do this music, you know, because we love doing it. I mean, it's no one said it's going to be easy one way or the other. That's for sure.
Right.
And,
yeah.
You know, but I think it's like, I don't know, it's financially always when you're a band leader, you're never going to be on a, I mean, that's.
This is true.
Yeah. So, but
listen, it's always been that way, and it's important to know. I was talking to Warren Smith once, and he knew Eric Dolphy, and you know, he basically was telling me that Eric really didn't have. He really was just barely making it. You know, he made those records and stuff, but he was barely, and you know, he would be living off like eating brewer's yeast. Period.
Wow, that's savvy, man. Yeah.
So, you know, or I mean, so, you know, even like people who we would not think, because we equate fame with wealth, you know, we would think, oh yeah, Eric Dolphy would be doing fantastic, you know.
Sure.
But I think when jazz, you know, became more and more divorced from what was from popular music, then it became art music, and you know, the dynamics with the audience changed. I went to a talk that actually Braxton gave once, and he was talking. He when he talks about his life experiences, of course, it's really fascinating. And then he said his expectations of music and of making money and all that, it changed in general in the culture over the years. And he talked about a lot about non-market music and how important it was, you know. So again, he was inspiring, saying what our role is in the world, even if we're not making money, which is the usual, you know, metric for worth.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
But we got to make a little bit, so let's keep trying.
That's for sure. I'm always glad, you know. Yeah, but yeah, you know, it is what it is, and we can still do that and make music, and it's amazing. You know, it's such a privilege, actually. You know, always when I talk to musicians, I'm like, man, we should just be like, you know, you can play your own music and compose and actually make a living, even if you do other things like teaching or whatever next to it. But you know, that's a special thing, you know.
It is you know, and we have to value that, you know, to have that experience of making music with others and connecting on such a, you know, profound level, you know, and with the audience is it's just, you know, that experience is to be treasured, you know. So
that's beautifully put. You mentioned William Parker, Jason. I wanted to ask you, I know you guys hooked up already, like in the late 70s, I guess, right?
Yeah.
Like, how did this journey for you begin entering the New York scene? I mean, this creative scene. Were you still part of that loft scene that was happening in the 70s or not? Or did you miss that train?
Looking back, the late 70s was really the last phase of the loft scene, because by 1984 or so, it was just amazing how many people dropped out of the scene. It was just, and it was the rise with the neo conservative marketing of Wynton Marsalis. It was really a massive change. But I was 18 or 19, and I was living in the East Village. I was a student, and I went to this. There was this St. Mark's Place. At that time was totally abandoned, and there was a bookstore there that was well known for all the Bohemians, called the East Side Bookstore. And I saw a flyer there that said basement workshop for Asian Americans, come take our poetry workshop. And honestly, when I grew up, there was only 2 Chinese families in the whole town, right? So I'd never seen those words Asian American, and I knew, of course, that applied to me. So I went there and I made friends, and was writing my poetry, and there was a jam session there led by Geoffrey and Kuni Mikami, and a lot of musicians came to this jam session, and one of them was Will Connell Jr., and he played saxophone, flute, and later he played bass clarinet. But he was coming out of the Horace Tapscott Orchestra. And at that time, the LA musicians were coming to New York. I think Will is part of that wave. Arthur Blythe came to New York. Frank Lowe. Butch Morris. I think Azar Lawrence was here briefly. But I think he went back to studio work in California. But Will heard me, and he was very supportive, and we started to play duets almost, playing for hours, several times a week. And for me, it was just like amazing. I was just learning how to improvise, and on jazz standards, I didn't know anything, but the tunes with simpler cadences, I could play something by ear. So Will introduced me to the loft scene, and he introduced me to William Parker, who actually lived around the corner from me on 7th and 2nd Avenue, and or 1st Avenue rather. And so William at that time was doing actually what he does now, but at that time he was constantly composing. He was playing in the lofts in a zillion bands, and he would consistently be, the loft scene was all about self-producing a concert, and he would try mixed ensembles of different instruments. And so I started to play in a lot of his pieces. And then I think there was a bassist, Jay Oliver, who also doubled on drums, and he passed away, I'm not sure which year, probably in the 90s, I think. But we formed a trio, and Dennis Charles was supposed to be the drummer. He was just coming back to play. Dennis had stopped playing, and he wanted to play again, and Will knew him. Dennis, when he was getting back to playing, he'd walk around the East Village going like this. And I said, "What are you doing?" He says he's got to build back his muscles for playing drums. And you just see him like he's winding some string up and down the street. But the East Village back then had a concentration of musicians. You really could live within those 4 square blocks and know everybody.
That's amazing. I
mean, James Blood Ulmer lived across the street, and that sort of thing. But then Jay Oliver moved to Berlin, and he started playing with Steve Lacy. And then we asked William to join us, and then Matsuura. And then there was a week. Actually, there was like a week where William was sort of chilling, like he was taking a rest from the scene, and so he had time. And Zen had a storefront apartment on 6th Street, which was literally down the block. I had moved to that street. And we rehearsed for hours, like for a week straight. And I actually think
Oh,
that built our foundation, where we would play everywhere. But the loft scene, for example, William would do concerts at St. Mark's Church, which basically you pay $25 to the custodian to stay to keep the lights on, right? Today, if you wanted to rent that church, it would be probably at least $2,000 a
oh
night.
man, that's like crazy. Shit.
And so, the whole producing in the lofts where people had big spaces that were
Yeah.
low rent. Those days, it was very different back then. And the whole gentrification of New York, it never kills a creative spirit, but people flow where they can
Yeah.
flow.
Yeah.
And the whole texture of the scene is different from back then.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, it's amazing. It must have been such a different place, what I hear, the late 70s and
Yeah.
early 80s, the creativity. It was just, when I talk to all these guys like Nat Rothenberg or, Elliot Sharp and all Bobby Pravitt, the downtown scene, and like, they
Yeah.
just say it was like thousands of bands and everything was mixing and the creativity is going on, and it's like
Yeah. And in that block, I think there's some of that going on in New York, in Bushwick and in Ridgewood. So maybe it's there. But it's like I'm older now and I don't know those spaces. And I was joking to someone when I was probably 20 years old. I ran into Jimmy Lyons on the street, and Jimmy said, "Jason, what are you doing?" And I said, "I'm gonna play here." He goes, "What's that? Who's that? Where is that?" And now I'm older.
You're like that, yeah.
I'm asking younger musicians, I'm going, where is that? What are you doing? So this is life, right?
It's yeah. Oh, Jason, can we log out of this one? How did you decide to become a band leader then? Like, when was that story? I mean, since I think Unfolding Stone is your first one, right?
Yeah. Other than Commitment was a collective group.
Okay.
And then Unfolding Stone, I think, was my first as a leader.
How did that come about? Like, how did you decide? I mean,
yeah, I think, after Commitment disbanded, it was very I think at that time I didn't know how to lead a group, so I forgot how I met Mark Dresser and Jeff Gordon.
Yeah, beautiful man.
Somehow we met in the community, and I started to develop that music and slowly learn how to get gigs and organize things on my own and that sort of thing. And also,
was it heavy? Was it heavy for you in the beginning, or?
I think. Well, I think. Yeah, I think so. It was like stressful, a little stressful. But also, I was learning too, because Jeff and Mark, I had been so much into the free jazz area of New York. And Mark and Jeff were connected to it, but they came from a whole other different set of experiences and aesthetics and education and goals, right? And so that was a learning experience to understand those differences. So now when I have groups like, say, the string orchestra that I just did, I have players from that were, heavy duty classical players, to people in the noise scene, to these things. But I think now I have more experience where I know how to deal with everyone's energy and be able to get us all pulling in the same direction, which I think we did with Unfolding Stone. But I see that as the beginning of my learning process. Yeah. And then there was one piece on there that had Ned Rothenberg was on it. Yeah. And so that was for, I started doing film scores at that time. And so that was for an early animation film that I had done. Yeah. Because I had gone to film school for college.
really?
And
I
then,
didn't know that.
yeah,
Oh, wow.
yeah, I was doing that while running out to play in the lofts. Um,
Oh,
yeah. So at a certain point, I was trying to put my skills, my knowledge of film, and eventually on the side of the creative music, I was scoring mostly documentaries, a lot of public television. I did score some what's called source music for Martin Scorsese's Kundun,
really?
that
Oh,
Philip
wow.
Glass did the score. Yeah, that was my one little dip of my toe in Hollywood, you know. But now I'm not interested in that. I have a full-time teaching job, and
Yeah,
I,
that
I
helps. Yeah,
I teach sound design at NYU, and I do my music, and that fills my life. So I'm
yeah,
not running around hustling for films.
that helps. Yeah, yeah, that you have some security at least, and I think that's so important. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
But I think doing those film scores, I did 2 or 3 television commercials, learning um, and actually, learning the craft of that, and learning the decoding the business culture, and
Yeah.
all that is actually, I think, good for me. It's helped me, you know, um, it's improved my skill. It pushed my skills and understanding of how to produce things.
Yeah, how it all works actually. Yeah,
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 exactly how it all works.
yeah. Kind of all this when you're when you're a band leader and writing music, you have to. There are other things, of course. So I think that helps. Yeah,
Right.
yeah. Like, but
Yeah.
when I look at your 90s, I don't know. It must have been crazy. At least when I look at the albums I have you on, and I don't know. There's like Butch Morris we said, and Henry Threadgill I mentioned, and Braxton, and like how did you start
Yeah.
playing with all these giants? How does your story with Henry begin? Actually,
Um, I'm not sure when I met Henry. Will might have introduced me.
Hmm.
Henry still lives on 12th Street, which is, East Village. So I would see him because he'd always wear really, really outrageous hats. I don't know if he still does that. Maybe,
Yeah,
maybe he
yeah,
still does. But there weren't that many improvising string players and improvising violinists. There was Billy, there was Leroy Jenkins,
yeah.
there was a handful of others. So I started playing, as a side person in a lot of groups. One that I did the longest was with Makonda McIntyre. He had a loft in Tribeca, and he had weekly, was it weekly? Yeah, weekly rehearsals. Um, and one season he brought in guest saxophonists,
Hmm.
uh, and Henry was one. I think Arthur Blythe was another.
Oh, beautiful.
Was really remarkable was Clifford Jordan. I mean, they were all
Hmm.
remarkable, but my memory of Clifford Jordan was unique. First, he was very supportive of my playing, and then he started asking me all these music theory questions, which I didn't know how to answer then. Just showing that I don't know my stuff yet. Which is true. Um, but what was interesting, he exchanged fours with a horn player in the band on a blues, and this other horn player is typical of that time where out of the loft scene, post Coltrane, saxophonists generally everyone was trying to play loud, and this guy had a huge tone, beautiful tone, and so initially you thought Clifford was like being totally, overwhelmed. But I tell you, a couple choruses go by, and that loud player didn't have anything more to say.
Hey, yeah,
And Clifford was just blossoming, blossoming, blossoming. So I learned a lot. I still think about that experience about, um, the art of improvisation that
yeah.
Clifford
Yeah.
had. So anyway, I was playing. I was in circulation. I played with Arthur Blythe in strings and David Murray in strings, and so
Hmm.
there's
Okay.
different string groups. So somewhere along the line, well, I mean, Henry knew of me, and I think it was probably through Will Connell, and yeah, and so the very, very circus groups. I'm on a record with him, but I did some other projects. We played at the Public Theater, music he wrote. It was crazy. It was like for a fashion show, and all the clothes was made out of plastic.
Oh wow. Okay. Bizarre.
And Henry composed the music. I remember that.
Wow.
And I also played with Henry his oratorio at BAM, which was it was a really large group, you know.
Wow.
So yeah,
That's beautiful, man. Yeah.
Henry's an amazing person, strong personality, beautiful heart, you know.
Yeah, it's I mean, it's his music for me. It's just like all these guys, you know, you played with. It takes me months and years to understand, and I still don't get it. So I'm just like,
I don't know if I do either. They may be nothing to get. It's just to experience, and
yeah,
you know.
it's just so much there. Like every time I listen
Yeah.
to a composition, and I'm like, man, it's, you know, it's amazing. Yeah. Anyway, but yeah, what about Braxton? You mentioned Anthony. Like,
I think early on during his MacArthur grant period, right?
yeah,
He was working with the bassist Joe Fonda.
yeah,
And then Joe invited me to come up to Wesleyan to rehearse some music with Braxton. And it was, you know, I remember those rehearsals because Anthony will sometimes go into a stream of consciousness monologue. You know, I would say like, well, when I see this sign, where should I go? And he would go and tell a whole long story. And then he said, in other words, Mr. Hwang, I don't know. But all the funniness is there's a serious intent there to open my imagination,
yeah,
and be
yeah,
open to possibilities that are not to be determined, you know.
yeah,
So I met Anthony then, and then Joe brought Kevin Norton in and Ted Reichman on accordion,
yeah.
Ted Norton drums. So we did the one record. We went to Istanbul.
Istanbul, yeah, the sextet. Yeah, I love that one. That's so good.
Yeah. Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
We shared a bill with Eddie Palmieri.
How
We
was
were
that
the other
one?
half of the bill.
Oh
I
my
know,
God.
it was really, and Eddie Palmieri and Anthony got along really well, and they wanted to do something together, you know, and yeah, it was
That
a
would have
really
been a funny
wouldn't
record, man.
yeah, it
Eddie
wouldn't have
Palmieri
been
and Anthony Braxton.
yeah. But you know, the double bill would only would happen not in the United States, you know. Um,
Wow.
yeah, but that was, you know, it was a great experience, you know, being then I later I played in his two operas. Were
Okay.
just mammoth undertakings, you know. The first one Joe helped him with, and second one Taylor Bynum produced.
Yeah.
And yeah, so
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah. But at the same time, you worked with Butch also? Like,
I worked with Butch starting in probably around 84, 85.
already? Okay.
Yeah. And this was when Butch was, I think, transitioning out of playing the cornet and conducting. So he was
Conducting,
conducting he conducted David Murray's big groups, and he started doing his large groups. But the early groups, he drew upon players that were from the jazz, loft jazz scene, right? So I had a lot of really treasured experiences. We did a week at a storefront on Houston, and all sorts of players came through. Philip Wilson, you know, Frank Lowe was there.
yeah.
Steve McCall.
Really? Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so it was like, you know, and Steve was very supportive of me. I mean, he really was encouraging, which I appreciated. And then he started. I remember playing with Sonny Murray.
Wow.
It's soundscape. But then gradually Butch evolved, and he started to see that his process could put in really disassociated people. So he started bringing people in from the noise scene
Yeah.
in New York. In New York, then I have to say was the music scene was to some extent segregated between black
Yeah, I
and
wanted to
white.
ask you. Yeah.
It really was. And so there weren't, he started bringing in white musicians and black musicians, and I'm somewhere in between as usual, right? But it wasn't just race, it was aesthetics and the way of making music. And so, Bill and Wayne Horvitz,
Yeah.
Shelley Hirsch, all of them, but they have a different way. And then, so he was blending people together, and he was able to do some extraordinary things just by understanding the different energies. That's what I think I learned from him about how to, the old I think he took further the old the common knowledge of how Ellington would write
For the musicians.
players.
Yeah.
I think Butch learned how to conduct and orchestrate for individuals, and that was one of his gifts.
Yeah.
So and then in that period, he still dealt with the formula of soloist, big group, you solo, and I'll do some things with you. And then he evolved later where he didn't want any soloists, and he wanted it all to be ensemble dynamics,
Yeah. That's incredible. Did you ever talk with these guys about composition also? Like with Anthony or Henry or Butch, like what's their process?
Not really. Butch did not bring in that much written music.
Okay.
He was trying to write a musical called Modette, and we did a workshop with that. And I wish he wrote more, because Butch had a very, very individual lyric instinct. He could write a beautiful melody. And so I just was blessed to experience how people, compose. Like Jerome Cooper, and I mean all the Chicago musicians. I don't know what was going on, but everybody that generation is just so individual. And so Leroy Jenkins and Jerome, they each created very differently. Henry, another direction. Many years more recently, I played with Wadada Leo Smith, and he also is just a deep original. And so I think somehow being exposed to them may not have taught me what to do, but it showed me what's possible for artists that created their own world through their own way outside of mainstream, pedagogy, right? So, but we never talked about how to compose. I did go to one composer who actually I learned other musicians. I think Henry had gone to him, and at different times other people from the jazz musicians was Hale Smith. And Hale conducted actually Henry's oratorio in Brooklyn. But Hale is a classical composer, and in the late 50s he knew and would hang out with Dolphy and with Cecil Taylor, and he would be the conservatory trained composer that musicians came up to him and asked him questions about theory and orchestration. And then he wrote a piece. I hope I'm characterizing Hale's music right. I think he really did come out of serialism. And he wrote this great piece and got a position at the Cleveland Conservatory where he stayed. And by the time Henry was working with him in New York, he had retired. And it was sometime after Henry's piece, I wanted to take lessons in orchestration, and I did a couple lessons with Hale, and he showed me how the conventions of laying out an orchestra score. And I was doing larger works at the time, and
Yeah.
yeah, he was a great professor, full of stories and knowledge. Yeah, Hale lived in Long Island, and the house was neat as a pin. And we're walking through, and he goes, "Now we're going to my space." We go into this bedroom where he composes, and it's freaking nuts. He's got books and files stacked up to the ceiling on the floor. And I'm going like, oh my God, you know, we weave through all that to his desk, and he knows where everything is. You know, I'd have a question, he goes, "Oh, I want to show you this score." And he would go somewhere in that room and pull out the score, and he knew where it was, and he would show it to me. He was a lovely man.
Yeah, it's nice to see that experience. I mean, did you then did you then base, like, you know, Symphony of Souls, like starting to write this larger ensembles? How do you imagine a work like that, you know, and to start with it? I mean, I know it's a different process, I guess, than for a trio. Or
yeah, I think well, that piece is similar to the way I'm handling the orchestra now. So there was a number of written passages, and
okay.
You know, and I would hold up my hand for each section. And so, but what I didn't know was how it would flow, and that takes performance. And so, because the written music can be played in, you know, 5 minutes, right? And the CD is 50. So it's a matter of how to tell the story with that material. So we did, you know, I wrote it, and after one performance, I could revise, or I would add another section. And so, you know, there was never money for it. So there was always about, let's meet 40 minutes before the performance, and I would go over things in 20 minutes, and most everybody was very skilled at reading music, and then we would just go for it, you know.
Yeah.
So we did, you know, 3 or 4 performances before the recording session. But conceptually, to take written music followed by improvisation is always a part of jazz. But I think the sequencing and the narrative aspect, I don't remember the charts quite like that, but I think both Leroy Jenkins and Jerome Cooper would structure that music that way with the Revolutionary Ensemble recordings, because I think I remember Jerome saying they actually would record it in sections, which nobody did at the time. Everyone did full take, you know, the energy's got to flow and all that.
Yeah.
But they had distinct chapters where there were points where they could cut. So just in turn, I don't know if they always did that, but they could. And so the multi-section piece with improvisation in a non-jazz arrangement form, I think that was in the air. I can only recall both of them, but I can't remember what Henry's charts looked like.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, William Parker just put out this record, Universal Tonality, and it was a big group that we did at Roulette, and I barely remember the concert, you know. And to me, I don't remember what was on the page and what was not on the page. But I mean, it's an amazing scene. And I remember thinking it was a gig, you know.
Yeah.
But now listening to this, which was a live recording and not a perfect mix, right? And that the energy flow and how we move from idea to idea and transformed was just amazing to me. And actually, you know, that the mix wasn't perfect at the time, I would think like, oh, you know, the horns are really loud, you can barely hear the strings. But now I hear it so distant, it's interesting that it's not the right balance. It's a world of its own. And hearing the strings a little further away, it's part of the character that I love, you know. So So I don't know, maybe William was doing some of that then, because I don't remember what he had on the page. But the thing we did in Paris recently, he had different sections, but it works a little. All of us do it a little bit
Different, yeah, yeah,
differently, yeah. So
yeah. It makes sense what you do. You know what I said in the beginning, this blurring the line between improvised and composed. You know, having played with all these guys that we've talked about now, it's kind of makes you also, right?
Yeah, I definitely. Well, all of us, we benefit from our experiences, and so somehow. But Symphony of Souls for string orchestra, that session we had, I think we had like 35 strings, which is crazy, and drum set, Andrew drums, and the studio, which is no longer there, Systems 2. They're so beautiful. It's a big studio.
Yeah. Oh, you were in Systems 2. Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
I love that place, man.
There?
Yeah. Okay. It's not there anymore? Really?
No, they sold the building. They probably sold it for millions. You know?
Shit. I love that place, man.
Yeah. And it had a great sound. And you know, we did 4 hours in the studio, of which the studios probably spent 5 hours the night before setting up the microphones. So they're very nice because they're not really making money from a 4-hour session, right? For all the prep work that they did, you know. But in this case, we did 2 whole takes. You know, we just improvised, 2 whole takes. And I think I made 1 edit from between the 2 takes.
Amazing.
So but that was, you know, and then the mastering engineer who Paul Zinman, who he's a classical engineer that I've used because I knew him through New World Records, and he generously said he would mix it for me for like a ridiculously low fee, and he really did a beautiful job. Yeah,
it's a very nice record. I mean, it's so nice.
Thanks for listening.
Yeah, to have these different aspects of your music, I love that it's so varied always. You know, like and that when I said I didn't know what you're doing, like that I thought I was really following everything. Then I saw like 1 month ago you issued this Uncharted Faith album also. And I didn't even. I was like, man, that sounds. I have to really dig into it. I listened like really fast yesterday, and
okay.
So it's like you're doing all these different things, like from solo, duo, and I love that. It's beautiful.
I think you are too, from what I saw on your site. You know.
Yeah. I mean,
So the Uncharted Faith with Dino was a close friend of Butch, and actually co-collaborator on so much, you know. I mean that was part of, Dino was a, you know, powerful creative person on his own, but he also, when he worked with Butch, was totally gave him so much faith and belief and energy. So they really created a lot together. And Dino actually years back encouraged me to, because he was doing such amazing thing. At that time he was still playing trombone through electronics, and then so you know, he really encouraged me to work with electronics, which I did for a period, and then a long period I just played acoustic, but now I'm back. I have a trio actually with guitar, Anders Nielsen guitar and Michael T.A. Thompson drums, and I'm mixing it now, and I play electric on that. So I'll send it
seriously?
to you.
Oh man, I'm looking forward to hear that.
Okay. I'm just mixing it now. So
like improvised, or you composed?
We recorded it last. I composed, and But having said that, during the pandemic, it's with the Human Rights Trio, right?
Yeah.
And it was hard. We did 1 concert outdoors, right? Everyone's far apart and stuff. And so I started in the sets, because I had not had no time to rehearse and all that. And I had a hard time composing during the pandemic. I
Yeah, I know.
tried, and I would look at things, and I would just go like, I'm not into it. And then later I went back to see if I judged it too harshly, and I was playing through stuff I wrote, and I thought, yeah, it's not. I rejected it. It
I know what
wasn't
you mean.
good.
Yeah.
So we started in this set playing. Yeah, we started playing a couple of complete open improvisations. We did that for a live Zoom concert for broadcast too, and it was really great to do that in the trio. So I'm kind of back to where like it's composed music does a certain thing, but sometimes when you just play free
Oh man.
improvisation,
Yeah.
if you're clicking, it's just sort of like there's no, what people get confused is it's free and not organized. When you're on, it's very tight and organized
I
and
agree. Yeah.
not a wasted moment, So yeah, maybe the next time we go to the studio, we'll have to do a couple of those and see what happens,
Yeah, it's nice. I like free improv. It's if you find the
Yeah,
like-minded people that you connect, it's so easy. It's just like
yeah, yeah,
composed music. It's like, man, or we're going there, and it's like
yeah,
it's not a
yeah, yeah,
struggle.
yeah.
Yeah, it's nice to do
Right,
that. Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
It's good to remember, right? So
Oh man, yeah. But Jason, you said you're mixing this new trio that you have. What's
yeah,
otherwise your plans for the future? I mean, do you have some? Are you
yeah.
writing some new music or like new gigs or albums coming out? Or
Well, Human Rights Trio, I'm writing music. I almost have enough for a CD, and then we had a concert recently, and some of the new pieces, um, I'm going to revise a little. So sometimes with composing, I don't know if you experience this, when it's different energy, the idea of executing music versus creating music, can be,
yeah,
connecting the can be a problem. So if you write too much, the mode of executing starts to dominate, and I want it to be inspirational. So what I write is it's like a melody, and that if you write a great melody, you cannot add or subtract a
oh
note.
man, yeah,
The melody is a jewel, right? And so I kind of hold it to that standard, and say I think I wrote too much. We don't need that much,
when do you know
So
that?
I try to make it really essential.
When do you know that it's
Oh,
that
I
it's
lost the connection.
sorry here.
Oh,
I mean, when do you know that it's enough?
that's hard, right?
Yeah, for me that's
Yeah, I know. I think I actually really find out not even in rehearsal. I find out in performance.
okay.
I'll feel it. You just see if it feels right. And yeah. So anyway, I'm working on some music there, and so we're going to do a residency at the University of Illinois in March, and so I'm going to teach some classes, and then Human Rights Trio will come in. So I'm just in the process of organizing some small concerts in New York to develop things. So so after that, I think I'd like to, if the music's ready, I'll record that trio, and then I think I'll finish mixing the trio, the critical response trio with Anders, the electric trio. I think I'll finish it by the end of the month.
Super.
So I do my own mixes now. I teach mixing production. But I do it very slowly.
But it helps, man. That helps so
It
much
does.
financially. I
Yeah.
mean,
So I
yeah,
work very slowly and
yeah.
just until I feel it's ready. So it takes me a while. So that's why it'll take probably a month. So I hope to release that maybe in February or something like that, and then I'll kind of change and try to get some gigs for that group to follow the CD. And
Yeah.
what I'm really trying to find out is how to develop my quintet again with piano, because there's not a lot of spaces in New York for this music that have pianos.
Piano, yeah.
So, yeah. So yeah. And of
What
course
about Europe?
it's hard.
Do you have any plans of coming to
Yeah.
Europe or?
I've had a hard time really connecting to Europe. We're back in the I mean, I was in Paris at the Son d'Hiver festival with William, which was wonderful.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, but if anyone in Europe is listening to this, I am available.
There's me, there's my CD, you know.
Yeah.
It's like that YouTube shit, you know, like subscribe. Don't forget to subscribe. And like that's
Yeah.
no, but yeah,
But you know, I find in the music that there are distinct subcultures, right? There's people for funding,
Yeah.
there are the critics, and then there are the presenters, and maybe the European presenters. And everybody is looking for something a little bit different
Yeah.
to support their vision, you know. And so it's really hard to see exactly how that works. But what I do is I don't try to change myself for any of those audiences. But
Yeah,
where I
yeah,
do feel
sure.
I can consistently grow is to learn how to communicate my ideas verbally and in writing, and how to develop my music, and then to see if there's a space for me in any of these areas, you know, for me to flow into, you know.
Yeah.
And so Europe has changed a lot, I think, for Americans, you know,
Yeah.
and it's not quite the same as in the even in the late 70s. There are a lot more festivals, and maybe those festivals at a certain point, if there were 12 concerts, maybe 8 of them were Americans, you know.
Yeah.
And now I think it would be at best the opposite, right? So
Yeah, European creativity
but as it
became
should.
really strong also. So I think
That's right. That's
yeah,
right.
yeah,
Yeah. So, and I think that's actually it's true around the world. I mean,
yeah,
I was watching recently these YouTube videos of the Blue Note in Tokyo, and you know, it's more commercial music, right?
yeah,
But there are some tremendous players, world-class players there, and that I don't know. And I
yeah,
don't know because they're not marketed here, they're not in a downbeat magazine, and
yeah,
they're not in Europe. And so I thought, why is that? Because this player is a great player, you know. And so this makes me wonder, even for myself, born here, being a Chinese American, of that perception in each of these areas, you know,
yeah,
how they see my narrative or what they expect from me and what I fulfill or don't fulfill, you know. Because otherwise, I'll tell you a story that raised questions. I was recently when I did a Zoom concert with Human Rights Trio,
hmm,
and I won't say the name, but a major New York newspaper did an article, and they were doing articles on alternative concert spaces in New York, and this was one. This they sent over a photographer, and I noticed it was a little odd because he never took pictures of me, and I'm the leader. And then he took a few, and I didn't think about it. And then the story comes out, and they don't have any pictures of me, and they have pictures of Andrew and Ken, which I'm happy for them. But that's odd, and that breaks sort of etiquette, right? Now
yeah,
I know they weren't there for me, but
but
etiquette would
still,
say at least put a picture. But this article, if you think about it, today's journalists, their work is judged by how many clicks people will read it.
yeah,
And some people have been fired because their articles don't get enough
that's
clicks.
sad. Yeah,
And they know this article about lifestyle, bohemian lifestyle in New York City, is very interesting to other people around the world or in middle America. Like, oh wow, they're doing all these things in this giant city. So someone, a picture editor, or someone in that decision making, he's looking at pictures and going like, Chinese face, jazz, violin, no.
that's yeah,
White guy with beard, white guy with long hair,
yes,
yes. You know, Isaiah Collier, who was also there, yes, but not the Chinese guy. And they had, I'm not talking about, they had they had multiple pictures of everybody else except me, not just
That's
one,
terrible.
multiple.
That's terrible.
But you see, I mean, but so that makes me question that I don't truly understand that perception of me. But what I'm determined to do is to fulfill my mission in the music, right?
Yeah.
And to make a case for who I am. And if I run against opposition in different areas, so be it. But I will push for my truth, you know, to come out, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But that situation with the photo and the lack of marketability of some great musicians here. For that example, there's great musicians in Europe that you don't hear about in America.
Oh, sure,
either.
man.
So,
Oh, sure. Yeah.
you know, there's tons, right? So
Yeah.
I mean, it's still America centric, but I don't think America is obviously not the only place where greatness in
Oh,
it's really that was 50 years ago,
Yep.
maybe, you know.
Europe is now, I mean, everywhere. It's
But anyway,
incredible.
it
Yeah.
made me realize
Yeah.
yeah, right.
Yeah.
So I would think you could say the same as well, you know.
Yeah.
But I don't know how many of those Japanese musicians tour Europe either. So
Zero, I think.
yeah,
Honestly.
so,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. So as far as that newspaper, because I did TV commercials for a brief hellacious period of my life. I know how they think, and there's something where they say, where does the steak sizzle, you know?
Yeah.
And you know, and they make a snap judgment. They instinctually know what's the selling point is, and I was not the selling point.
Yeah.
And that could be a problem for me that is larger than me.
But it's
that I will never understand. Yeah. But one thing I want to make clear, because it's such a sensitive subject, you know, I wouldn't say that, you know, if I don't get a gig that's racist, right?
No.
But I do think that there is in this world globally, there's racialized thinking, and you know, our expectations of people can be still based on appearances on some level. It's a way of organizing the world, right? And of course, it's always been more complex than that. But of all the factors that create an interest in a performer, race is still a narrative at play, no matter who you are, right?
Yeah.
And so, you know, it's abstract, and yet it's so real, right? So,
yeah, I mean, I wanted to ask you this because when I hear your music, it's the first time actually now that we talk that you mentioned many times Chinese American, right? And like always when I hear your music, it's your music. I never thought.
Thank you. I love that.
I never thought about who you are in a sense, whether you're an African or Chinese or African American, Chinese American, right? It's like now that you pointed it out, I'm like, okay, but even now for me it doesn't point out to anything. But throughout your career, did you sense that division also? I mean, because if you're an African American musician, of course they did that, but you as a Chinese American, was that present in the jazz scene or not throughout the years, if you look back? I mean,
I think absolutely.
Really?
I mean, for in good ways and bad ways.
Yeah.
So in good ways, I think presenters, even now, they're under pressure. They're public institutions, and they have a public responsibility, and they want to show that they're presenting diversity.
Yeah.
So, so if you're a person of color, you know, they look at you as representing that community on their concert calendar, you know, so it isn't all white or something, you know, so and so even though I remember I did the Victo Festival in Canada, Victoriaville Festival. And I remember early on, the first time I played that festival, there was an article about myself. The reviewer, I forgot her name, the pianist, but there are two Asian musicians in the festival, and they reviewed us together, even though my music had much more correspondence to other people, right? But he saw that, oh, the two Asian musicians, what are they doing? They should be together. So it's a way of organizing the world. So those perceptions are
that's bizarre.
I think Yeah, they're not with everybody. So I mean, but it does exist, you know. So they have to. So I think presenters have to think that way. I think also similarly, funders who gets grants
Yeah,
and that sort of thing
yeah,
has to fulfill certain narratives as well. So, you know, there's so many different kinds of art. And if all the funding went to one racial group and not the others, you know, that's a problem. You know, so that's what I meant. Sometimes who you are is a determining factor, or at least it's a factor
it's a factor.
in
Yeah,
receiving funding, and with presenters as well. I don't know if that's true of Americans performing in Europe, but I think to some extent, at least with the mainstream presenters in America, they think of it, you know. So, but the underground venues in New York, nobody cares about that stuff, you know. It's pretty open to everybody.
Yeah. In Europe, definitely. Still, there are still many promoters that, you know, will not book a band unless it has a New York musician in it. Like
really?
in Italy, let's say in Italy. I mean, I love playing in Italy, but there are still many promoters. If you have a US musician, most likely you'll get a gig, you know. And if not,
it's so interesting because I know a Japanese bass player, and he's been in New York for 30 years, you know. And he was in a group that was going to tour Japan, and the presenter said, "We don't want a Japanese bass player in Japan."
Yeah, come on, people, be happy, be proud, you know.
Yeah, but it was a real thing. They think that would affect the draw or something. It's pretty. Yeah, so there you go. It's like it goes all different directions, you know, this sort of narrow-minded stuff that we hate, but
yeah, but it's there.
Yeah, we have to negotiate with it and do battle with it, really, you know. And change is happening. I think definitely more people are open-minded to diversity than when I was young, you know. So
yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think here in the States, for example, when I was a kid, I would never see any Asian Americans on television at all, you know.
Oh, sure.
Except for really stupid roles. And so now when I see them in a TV commercial or something like that, I'm going like that happened a little bit earlier in California where there's a larger population, but in New York, no, not until the last, I think, 5 years do you see that a little bit. But I did a education event with Tiwa Chang, who was a television journalist, you know, and he gives a talk to these kids in Chinatown, and he said, you know, when I was out of the Wharton School, which is a really prestigious school in University of Pennsylvania, and he wanted a job in broadcasting, he made a video of himself, and he sent it to every station everywhere, you know, could not get a job. And he went to his teacher and he said, "What, could you look at my video? Because, you know, I can't get a job." And he said, "Well, you don't understand. When a producer has 50 tapes on his desk and he pops in your video, he thinks Japanese spy or kung fu artist." And he goes, "Not good." And then, you know what I mean? So it was that impression. I think we're beyond that now.
Yeah,
you know?
I hope so.
I think.
I want to hope so. Yeah.
I hope so.
That's terrible. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's true, actually, what you're saying. Yeah. Now that I think about it, yeah, it's bizarre.
Well, that's interesting in Europe that the presenters want one American.
Yeah, many clubs. So. I mean, in the music that I play and that you play, that's not the case, you know, because Europe is so strong also in that segment. Okay. But like in this more, you know, small scene, let's say,
straight ahead
like that straight ahead thing, then there's like it's that they want to see the, you know.
That's amazing because there's so many great players in Europe.
Come on, man. For me, it's just like, you know, I close my eyes and listen to the music. I don't care who's playing it. If it's good, it's good. It's just like, it doesn't matter, right? It's That's how. Yeah. Anyway, bizarre.
I think that's what. Oh, that's some people in popular music even saying that other than a few exceptions, the music now is not as global as it is local, because locally there's so much worthy and high level artistry, and it becomes a very acceptable thing if you become global, where you have something that no one's ever heard before that makes you special. It has to be pretty remarkable, even if in popular music or not. I mean, there's just a lot of great people. So
Yeah,
so hopefully one of you, either you or I, will get lucky.
Oh,
I
we
hope
are.
it's you.
Oh man, we are already. I don't want to.
One of us will be lucky. Yeah.
I stopped complaining.
All right.
It's all good. So it's we're
Yeah. I hear you.
no, but cool. But cool, man. Jason, I will not take more of your time, but thanks for sharing some of these thoughts, man. I really appreciate it.
It's good to talk, good to meet. And do you ever come to New York at all?